They are the issues that face all residents in our great Central Valley. Development, agriculture, transportation, healthcare. What does our future hold, and what will it mean to the folks living throughout California? In this episode of Great Valley, we take a closer look at the increasing Hispanic population and what role that majority minority will play in our future political and social issues. Join host David Hosley as we explore the topics that mean so much to the success of this Great Valley.
Hello, I'm David Hosley, and this is Great Valley. Most of the Central Valley's population growth in recent decades has been driven not by Bay Area residents in search of affordable housing, but by a dramatic surge in this region's Latino population. Today, almost 2/3 of the Valley's children are Hispanic, and this group will play an increasingly important role in our region's future.
The Central Valley is an ethnically diverse region, but perhaps no group will wield more influence in the region's future than Hispanics. Hispanics currently make up for 30% of the region's population, but in the southern San Joaquin Valley, their share of the population is closer to 50%, and their numbers are expected to grow an unprecedented 65% in the coming decades. Already, nearly 2/3 of Central Valley children are Hispanic. As a group, Hispanics are diverse. Statewide, about 2/3 are Democrats, and the remaining 1/3 are Republican or Independents. And depending upon whether they were born in the U.S. or came here as immigrants, Latinos are likely to hold different political and social views on issues such as immigration, regional growth, and abortion. Hispanics also face unique challenges. They have higher rates of diabetes and teenage pregnancy, and while they've made political inroads, they are still less likely to vote in elections than blacks, whites, or Asians. As the region charts its course for the future, along with asking how our cities and economies will evolve, we must also ask who we are. And Latinos will continue to be an integral part of that discussion.
Joining me to discuss Hispanics in the Central Valley is former State Assemblywoman Sarah Reyes, who now works as a Senior Program Officer for the California Endowment, and Fresno City Councilman Henry T. Perea, who was the youngest person ever elected to the city's council. Well, thanks to both of you for being here today. Sarah, let's start with you, and let's talk about this community. You're a Fresno native. You've worked in the civic arena most of your life. In your experience, how has the steady growth of the Hispanic population influenced the region's political atmosphere as well as its social landscape?
Well, you know, we are the fastest growing community throughout the nation, and here obviously in the Central Valley, we have always been one of the largest communities. And what you've seen over the course of time, or what I've seen since I grew up and had grown up in this area, is that we have engaged more people, we have gained more power politically, in business, and in other areas, and we tend to continue to do that as we grow bigger in numbers.
It's unprecedented. And we're on a pace now, by 2020, my calculations are that at that point the Central Valley will be majority Hispanic. In other words, it'll be 41%, and the Caucasian population will be 40%. Right. And our Asian and African American populations are going to stay about what they are now, 8 and 9% for Asian and 5% for Black.
And some would argue, in some counties in the Central Valley, we've already reached that majority, and others will soon come slowly behind us, and some fast behind us.
That's absolutely true. The city that I live in now, the largest ethnic population is Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are many, many interesting aspects to that kind of growth. When you look at the southern part of the Central Valley, that's the most Hispanic part of our arena, and it's growing north. And that's, as you mentioned, it's true what's going on in the United States. Of course, we've had people in the United States with Mexican heritage since before the Revolutionary War.
So well, we have to remember this was Mexico. And then I also have to remind people that when we talk about the Hispanic community in the Central Valley, well, traditionally it has always been a large majority and still is a large majority Mexican American. We have Central Americans, South Americans, Cuban Americans, Puerto Rican Americans, which are also part of our culture in the Latino community.
Well, the rise is not without some bumps in the road, though, and health is one thing that's very concerning. You're now working for the California Endowment and working on some very interesting projects where you're trying to focus on particular communities in the Central Valley and do some deep diving with your grantsmanship. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. But what about health? When we look at the Hispanic community, there are some significant challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Hispanic community in large part has a huge problem with diabetes going unchecked and not getting it in the early stage and under control. Additionally, it's high blood pressure. Many suffer from high blood pressure and again don't catch it until they're later in life. And then obesity, which affects, as we're seeing, a large majority of people, but large numbers in the Latino community as well.
So when you're now focusing on these 4 communities in the Central Valley, what are you trying to accomplish with this place-based granting?
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do with our Building Healthy Communities is go into the community and ask the community what they see as the issues. And in the health issues, what we're seeing is really the ability to communicate and understand this health area that we have, manipulating the system and figuring out if you go to a federal qualified health clinic, how do you go to the hospital, how do you talk to your doctor if you don't speak the language, all of those things coming together to make sure that we provide better service for people. And so what we're seeing is people are rolling up their sleeves, they want to do more, they want to make it a better community, a healthier community, and that's what we're working on.
One of the issues that may be concerning is teenage pregnancy. What are the rates like for the Hispanic community with teenage pregnancy?
Well, I think when you look at the Central Valley, that's one of the records that we don't like that we hold, and that's Fresno and Tulare County can debate, depending on who you're talking to, number 1 and 2 in teen pregnancy as a whole. But for the Latino community, we have a large number of our young women who are getting pregnant at an early age. And we have to address that because while we want to be the majority, while we are a booming community, that brings issues as well. How does that young person complete their education? How does that young person take on the responsibility of parenting? And how do we make that young person successful in being a parent? And so those are some of the issues that we're going to have to deal with.